She was perhaps the greatest temptress in the Bible. Her beauty and deadly charms, so intoxicating, they brought down Israel's strongest man. Her name was Delilah. Could this 3,000-year-old skull be that of the great seductress?
That is so cool. It looks incredible.
A beautiful early Philistine.
We've seen countless depictions of this biblical enchantress, but they've never been 100% accurate. Now, that's all about to change. Forensic analysis of this skull may tell us how Delilah looked.
Well, we are trying to fit the last pieces in order to create a complete skull.
How many pieces did you find when you excavated the skull?
This skull is composed of at least 100 pieces.
100 pieces?
At least 100 pieces.
Now, we're dealing with a female skull.
Yes, this is a female skull. We are looking for a Philistine female skull,
Exactly,
not a male skull.
exactly. Now, how do we know that it was a Philistine?
Well, by identifying artifacts that were found with the skeleton. And if the date is fit, I mean, more or less Iron Age, and if the geographical location is within the territory of the Philistine, you can be sure that these are Philistine skulls.
So it's fair to say that we have a 3,000-year-old skull that dates back to a time period where the Philistines lived in a particular region.
Absolutely.
According to the Bible, the Philistines ruled 5 city-states in the ancient land of Canaan: Ashdod, Ekron, Ashkelon, Gath, and Gaza. The Bible paints them as Israel's most dangerous enemy. We're in Ashkelon, on the appropriately named Delilah Beach. Ashkelon is one of Israel's oldest ports, but in the time of Judges, it was a Philistine city. The Philistines lived here, but they weren't from here. They came from across the sea. One of the biggest clues pointing to the origins of Delilah's people was written in stone almost 3,200 years ago. On the funeral temple of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III, we find the depiction of a great sea battle. Ramses calls them the Sea People, and they're foreign invaders from islands in the ancient Mediterranean. The artwork shows us exactly what Delilah's warriors looked like. So we're standing among these terrifying Philistine warriors,
Indeed.
complete with headdress and shields and swords. And surrounding us are these incredible reliefs.
What we're looking at is actually a so-called invasion of the Sea People. Basically, what you see here, this is a boat of the Egyptians. And you see here the Egyptians with the typical headgear.
Okay.
And also you have boats which have Philistines on them, or people similar to
I
Philistines.
recognize the headdress.
The typical headdress, the so-called feathered headdress.
Delilah's Philistines arrived in such numbers that the Egyptians allowed them to settle in the land of Canaan alongside the Israelites. And that's how the love-hate relationship began between the Jews and the Philistines. Samson is an Israelite, Delilah a Philistine. The Israelites are at war with the newly arrived Philistines, fighting for control of the coastal towns of Canaan. According to the Bible, Samson was born with the supernatural strength granted by God so that he could lead the Israelites to victory. But the Philistines know that Samson has a weakness: women. And the woman they pin their hopes on is Delilah.
This is so cool. We are walking down an actual reconstruction of a Philistine street.
Yeah, that's right. And all this stonework here is authentic, that's been excavated from the surrounding area here. And this wonderful pottery as well.
Incredible. Not something you see every day.
No.
So the Philistines came here approximately 3,200 years ago from a faraway land, and they do quite well here, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. For the first 200 or 300 years of their existence in this territory here, they're neighbors with the Israelites.
Right.
And it obviously was a continual problem because the Bible constantly warns the Israelites not to go the way of the Philistines. The Philistines, of course, have multiple gods. They're polytheists. So you have these repeated commands in the Bible to the Israelites. Don't get too involved with the Philistines. The laws in the Old Testament constantly reinforce the need to stay away from them. And yet their culture does seem to have had an allure for the Israelites.
The Philistines were forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
It's easy to see a woman like Delilah just capturing the heart of a young, virile Israelite, isn't it?
Yeah.
The Bible tells us it's in the Judean hills where Samson first meets and falls in love with Delilah. But Samson is still at war with Delilah's people. And so the Philistines entice Delilah to become their spy, offering her 5,500 pieces of silver to discover the secret of Samson's strength. And we're one step closer to seeing a face that could have betrayed ancient Israel's strongest man. Professor Herskovitz has almost completed the first step in bringing this Philistine woman back to life. He examines the teeth to determine how old she was when she died. They might be able to tell him if she was within Delilah's age range.
So if you follow, you see the teeth over here. This is the first molar, this is the second molar, and you can see that the third molar is just erupting, coming out, which implies that this lady was quite young, around the age of 18. At that time, girls got married around the age of 13, you know, and brought their first child around the age of 15, 16, something like that. So by the age of 18, she probably had already 1 or 2 children.
Now, we know it's a female. We know it's a Philistine skull. You've done this painstaking reconstruction. What's next?
We need to fill all those small holes with paraffin and let it dry for a day. So tomorrow we can go and CT scan the skull.
Ready for the CT scan.
Yeah.
So we're almost there.
We are almost there. We need another extra day for that.
Our Philistine lady may have died over 3,000 years ago, but she's about to be brought back to life. Bioarchaeologist Tali Cooperman prepares the Philistine skull for the next crucial step in facial reconstruction, a CAT scan.
How long have you been working on this particular skull?
2 months.
2 months.
Yes, that's normal with a skull with a great state of preservation like her.
Delilah's in good shape.
Beautiful.
Beautiful shape, yeah. So what is it like to hold a 3,000-year-old skull?
I think at first it's fascinating, and sometimes I think maybe I'm getting quite crazy because sometimes I'm talking with her and look at her and I don't know, it's quite funny.
Really, you develop a connection with the skull.
Yes.
If we can put a face to this skull, we just might get a look into the kind of Philistine eyes that tempted Samson. Delilah is a paid spy for the Philistines, and Samson, a warrior for ancient Israel. When Samson falls for Delilah, it marks the beginning of a tragic descent.
One thing that always intrigued me about the Samson story is that Samson seems to violate every single rule that God gives him, right?
Yeah, that's right. He has this special vow that his parents had taken on his behalf. They vowed that he would never touch corpses, that he would never cut his hair, that he would never drink alcohol. It was a special vow prescribed by the Torah. It was called the Nazarite vow.
We know he violates at least 2. He certainly drinks a lot. And he certainly kills quite a bit, which could lead us to believe that he probably touched corpses.
It's hard to imagine he didn't touch corpses, animal corpses, human corpses. Yeah.
And of course, the biggie gets his hair cut.
He certainly does, yeah. He doesn't cut his own hair, but he almost seems to know that Delilah's going to do it.
Delilah teases and begs Samson to tell her the secret of his tremendous strength. He tells her that if she ties him with 7 bowstrings, he will lose his power. It is his first lie. But Delilah knows he can't resist her charms forever. Flash forward 3 millennia. Professor Herskovitz hands over the completed skull to Chief Imaging Technician Mati Schnapp for a CAT scan.
So Mati, you do a lot of CAT scans, but have you ever done a CAT scan of a woman who is 3,000 years old?
No.
No?
It's
your first time
for me, yes. It's amazing.
What are those red lights going on? What is happening right
It's
now?
a sign that radiation in the room, so nobody should enter.
Very good to know.
The CT scanner processes a series of X-ray images to create an incredibly detailed 3D image.
So those are all the different angles of our skull?
Yes, this is a partial reconstruction.
The scanner uses the X-ray to virtually slice the skull into thousands of cross-sectional layers, and the computer puts it all together in the digital realm.
Now it starts the final reconstruction, which will be with the full resolution of the image.
So how many different angles are we going to get?
360 degrees all around.
All around, so you could see every aspect of the skull.
Yeah.
But to get the most accurate idea of what our Philistine woman may have looked like, we must determine her cultural ancestry. And this ring offers a clue.
I found for you this ring right over here, which could be jewelry of the Philistines. Could have been worn by Delilah, for all I know. The technique and the form of this ring, even though they're very simple, are unique. You want to try it on?
Do I?
Maybe on your pinky would go.
Okay. This is a 3,000-year-old gold,
Yeah.
perhaps Philistine ring.
Yeah.
Samson could have worn this ring.
Yeah, but we like to think of it as a ring worn by Delilah, actually.
Delilah could have worn this ring.
I assume that Samson's pinky was fatter than yours.
I'm stronger than I look.
Yeah. Why do I say it's a Philistine ring? Okay, it's not that sophisticated when you look at it.
Yeah.
But if you notice, there's a very particular technique, because you could take a ring. You want to make a ring? Fine. Take a piece of wire, put it in a circle, and that's it. You got a ring, presto. But somebody here did something different. Took a piece of wire, closed the two ends together, right? Then took the whole thing, flattened it down, and got two parallel strips, and then made it into a ring. That technique and this form is not found here.
Here, where do you mean by here?
Here, I mean in the land of Israel. When I see this, the technique and the form are so unique that obviously I'm looking to see where it comes from. So when we do our homework, we see that it comes from the area of Greece.
Archaeologists found this ring in Ekron, an ancient Philistine city very close to the valley of Sorek. The area the Bible tells us Samson first meets Delilah. But its style is rare and particular to Greece. It's a clue that links Delilah and her people across the Mediterranean to the Aegean Islands. And here, we can find the cultural remains that show us what her early Philistines looked like. Around 3,500 years ago, the Aegean was in turmoil. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, wars, and famine forced massive migrations. The Sea Peoples eventually settled in the land of Canaan. Among them were Delilah's ancestors. Archaeologists call the people from this place Minoans, and they left behind evidence of a thriving and sophisticated culture. The frescoes decorating the walls of this palace offer the best clues to how Delilah may have dressed. Delilah offers Samson and his Israelites refinements they have never seen. She pours on all her charms, but still, Samson manages to lie 2 more times when she asks how she might take his strength. But Samson's resistance is wearing thin. Every year, archaeologists discover more ancient artifacts that speak of Delilah and her Philistine temptations. The archaeologists think this site is the ancient Philistine seaport of Ashkelon.
The Philistines, I'm sure, were enticing. As we know from the stories of Samson, they had things that nobody else had. And at Ashkelon, they were rich. These are the people who were always finding the latest, greatest things and the latest, greatest fashions. Ashkelon is the seaport of the Philistines. It's the place where people import and export goods. And so Ashkelon is the place where you find the rich and diverse set of objects that come from all over the Mediterranean.
It's almost the New York or Athens of its day, in that it kind of exports its culture to the rest of the world and imports other cultures.
That's right. It's always a connected city, a cosmopolitan city. Here, they have drinking sets. They're straining their wine through special juglets. They have beautiful cups with red and black decoration. This is a sophisticated culture, and they have all of the dishware that signifies that sophistication.
The archaeologists here have unearthed a large Philistine marketplace with warehouses full of storage jars and juglets, showing that the Philistines were exporters of wine. And the figurines of goddesses, musicians, and dancers all point to a religion and a lifestyle much different than that of the surrounding Israelites. It's easy to imagine why Samson had difficulty resisting the festive Philistines.
Okay, and we're gonna try to get... This thing looks like it's sitting on the floor. You wanna come around and get the backside? Can you reach back there?
Sure, yeah, I can.
Get next to that rock.
Right there.
There we go. Okay. Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect.
It's all in there.
Oh, perfect, absolutely. So then we're gonna wanna take the sample. Beautiful, beautiful. A beautiful early Philistine bowl. Nicely done.
The wine that so tempted Samson would have been poured into bowls just like these, perhaps by Delilah's own hands. And now that our potential Delilah is in the hands of a radiologist, we're one step closer to unveiling her face.
The reconstruction of the skull is going to be finished now.
Let's take a look.
So I will be able to load it here on the CT viewer.
Oh, that is amazing.
This is the first scan.
These images are key for two different types of forensic facial reconstruction, physical and virtual. They'll create an exact replica of the skull, so a forensic artist can physically apply modeling clay.
So we're putting on the major muscle masses first, building basically from the skull outward.
While a computer modeler will use the CT scan to virtually layer on muscles, tendons,
We'll bring the skin back on now so that we can see how this is fitting with the skin.
and finally, Our Lady's face.
That's amazing. You're picking and choosing good parts of the skull and then layering them over where there's parts missing.
Yes.
Remarkable. So this is truly a combination of artistry and science.
Yes, it's like a craftwork. I feel like a sculpture, or maybe other people will say like God, because we are fixing a human being.
You're bringing a 3,000-year-old woman back to life.
I hope so.
I can't wait.
Delilah's fourth attempt to entice Samson ends in triumph. Their love, she tells him, depends on his honesty. Samson can no longer resist and tells her his strength comes from his promise to God never to cut his hair. It's a time when the Israelites need Samson's strength the most, because the Philistines are expanding their territory into Judean hill country. Our investigation turns to the Judean city known in ancient Hebrew as Sha'araim, or two gates, on the border between the two territories. Today, this site is called Kirbet Kiafa.
I'm standing at the border between where the Israelites and Philistines lived close to 3,000 years ago. Some scholars believe that these are the very gates mentioned in the Bible. And check out these massive fortified city walls. It's likely that battles happened right here. How do we know that this was a Judahite or Jewish city?
The diet. We have thousands of animal bones, and we have only sheep, goat, and cattle. No pig bones were found here. And we have pig bones in Canaanite and in Philistine cities.
Now, do we have any evidence of battles between the Judahites and the Philistines?
Well, you know, this city was built, and after 20 or 30 years, it's been destroyed. So who destroyed it?
Good question.
I think that the Philistines destroyed it, because this is the real enemy in this region. You don't have any other imperial forces.
The weaponry discovered here shows a city that was most likely under attack. And it all dates to the time when the Israelites and the Philistines clashed.
We have 3 swords. One of them is nearly 60 centimeters in size. We discovered just last week a beautiful spearhead, big like this, made from iron. And over the years, we discovered about 15 daggers. And usually in archaeological sites from the 10th century, you can have 1 or 2 items. And here we have already 20, telling you that the site was loaded with military equipment.
Weapons like these could have been used to defend a city against Delilah's raiding Philistines. And Samson's hands might have wielded a dagger just like this. After all, it was discovered just a few kilometers from where the Bible says he was born. But some say the Samson and Delilah story is just that, a story. Joseph Garfinkel thinks it's a little more.
The fact that you have Samson and Delilah in the Valley of the Sorek, together with Ekron and Bet-Shemesh in the 12th and 11th centuries BC, and other tradition here in this valley, telling you something. It's not just somebody invented it hundreds of years later. I see it as echo. You have some echoes in the biblical tradition. You have some historical memories in these mythological stories.
But one man's myth is another man's archaeology. And the story of this city is one of destruction. And what remains are these ruins.
It just collapsed inside. One wall like this and another wall like this. And I think that probably the Philistines came and destroyed the city.
If Samson's tale is true, this city was sacked because of a betrayal hidden behind a beautiful face. The kind of face the forensic team is well on its way to recreating. The virtual model is now anatomically complete.
אפשר לשלוח אותה למדפסת, מה אתה אומר?
אפשר להדפיס?
אני חושב.
Okay.
And the digital file is ready for a physical 3D printing. This incredible machine is actually a modified printer. But instead of printing with ink, it prints with glue. And instead of printing on paper, it prints the 1,600 cross-sectional layers from a CT scan onto fine layers of powder. Wherever the glue prints, it hardens, and the machine lays down successive layers of powder like fresh sheets of paper.
Now you will see the result.
After 10 hours of printing, the result is a 30-centimeter high cube of powder. But inside, the printed glue creates an exact 3D replica of our skull.
And now we expose it with air pressure and take all the powder off the skull and make it a little lighter.
It looks incredible.
The 3D replica of our Delilah's skull just needs a little brushing up.
It's finished.
And it's finished. Here she is. She's all yours.
Yeah?
Yeah.
From actual skull to CT scan to computer software to this magnificent machine. Incredible.
It's now ready for forensic artist Victoria Lywood. Police investigators employ Lywood when they're unable to identify skeletal remains. But she's rarely involved in cold cases over 3,000 years old.
Can you tell me a little bit about the area she's coming from? Are we looking at brown eyes and dark hair, that sort of thing, or?
You have to look for the typical, what you call, morphotype of South Europe. The southern South Europe, I mean, if you go to Italy, Greece, southern Turkey even, I would say that the skin was much lighter than local population.
Okay.
And the hair was probably dark, black. As for the eyes, it's hard to tell.
Of course.
But it is not necessarily brown.
Maybe if we picked a hazel color or something that we could cut in between the two.
I believe so.
And she has larger orbits.
The eye sockets are big, so she had really big eyes. Sophia Loren eyes, I would say.
And it looks like there's a lot of symmetry in her face as well, so that's an added factor in her attractiveness.
The canine fossa are quite deep, so she has quite beautiful, I don't know how you call it in English.
Cheekbones.
Cheekbones.
Right.
Big eyes, narrow, beautiful nose. We cannot say anything about the lips, the type of the lips, but you have...
Well, actually, we have some measurements for that.
Okay.
They've done some studies on that, so I'll look at those and I'll see if they can apply.
So here is the lady. Here is Delilah.
There she is.
In your hand.
Thank you. I'll do the best I can.
Having discovered Samson's secret, Delilah lulls him to sleep and calls for the Philistines to cut off his 7 braids. When Samson awakes, his vow to God is broken. His strength is gone, and so is Delilah. Surrounded by her Philistine soldiers, Samson is powerless to resist capture. In her Montreal studio, Lywood has the post-mortem sketches well underway. And for the first time, the type of face that might have betrayed Samson comes into focus. By adjusting the light source in the skull, she reveals every surface feature.
The assumption is the shadow on the bone should be somewhat similar to the shadow on the face. Now, when I look at the 2D drawing, it appears to be a wide nose. But we see here on the skull that there is shading, so that gives us an indication that that nose is actually much thinner. And here is where we want to color it in order to bring that up and show that this is a thin nose.
Using ultrasound measurements taken from real subjects with the same ethnic origins as our potential Delilah, Lywood meticulously glues tissue depth markers onto the woman's skull.
We're using tissue depth measurements for a Caucasian. This particular skull has a lot of measurements on it to flesh it out because there's been a lot of research done on the skulls.
She then molds the major muscles and tendons onto the skull before covering them with tissue and skin layers.
This is one of the muscles that gives the face a great deal of personality. There's a little plate that's on your eyelid that kind of works like a garage door opener. It opens and closes your eyes, raises your eyebrows. The symmetry of the Philistine lady is very good. It goes to reason that if the skull has got good symmetry, the face will as well. When we're doing facial reconstruction, we're looking for the asymmetry in the face. We're looking for the side of the face that's different to the others. No 2 sides of the face are exactly the same, but some are more symmetrical than others. We want to find the differences in this skull, and that's what gives her her individuality.
It takes more than 80 hours of sketching, measuring, and sculpting to replace what 3,000 years has taken away. But the face of a possible Delilah finally takes shape. In Boston, forensic artist Greg Mahoney takes a much more modern approach. He's uploaded the CAT scans from Israel and is using some of the most advanced 3D modeling technology to virtually build the Philistine lady's face.
We're doing something in the virtual space that's mirroring exactly what would be done in the physical world, except I have much more control and flexibility over what's happening here. I can go wherever I need to go. I can go back and forth. I can look through the work that I've done. So when the skin comes on later, I can look through the skin. I can look through the muscles and still see that skin. It's translucent, and I can see the skull that sits beneath this. So this gives me a lot more power. I can bring a lot more power to the way that we do facial reconstructions. But it's important to know that the skull is the one that's dictating the rules. When you think of it as a template that lies beneath the skin, it's telling us everything that we need to know about what sits on top. It tells us a lot more than you might imagine. What we see now that we have the skull in here is this has had significant damage, which presumably came from being under the ground for so long.
But before Greg starts layering on muscle and skin, he must remove 3,000 years of deformation.
What we'd prefer to have is a skull that's as close to what it would have appeared like at the time of death. Right here we see that there is some fractures that meet here at this joint, and there we have an indentation. And you can see how that changes the head shape here. We've got an indentation here. We've got this part of the jaw, this part here, is sticking out over here. All these things need to be addressed.
He brings the skull of our possible Delilah back to flawless. Greg tugs a fracture back into place.
So I'm going to try to get this piece here to line up to this fracture that we see here.
Resets a mandible.
This part of the jaw is back in line where it needs to be.
Replaces a shattered mastoid process.
And I can take this piece and sort of warp it to fit in with the surrounding bone.
And rebuilds missing nasal bones.
I'm just putting a chunk of clay in. It's going to approximate that tissue.
Using a state-of-the-art tool.
This is what's called a haptic device, this device right here. This haptic device is an interface that allows me to feel what's inside this virtual space in the computer screen.
He uses his sense of touch to reset bones and model with virtual clay just like real clay.
The hardware here responds to the 3D object that's inside the space, and I can feel that. Right now, it's sitting on the surface of that. I can push through, and now I'm inside of the skull. So you can feel parts of the skull that you couldn't normally feel with a human hand. And now I'm going to go out top, and I'm sitting on the outside surface, and I can pull that way out. So that's extreme, but the whole time, that is trying to pull back. It's very elastic feeling. It's trying to get that back into the position where it started from.
Greg applies tissue depth markers just like Victoria did in her physical reconstruction.
So instead of having to glue it to the surface, I can actually have it grow right from the surface.
But in the virtual realm, Greg is able to import all the measurements at once, quickly mapping them onto the skull of our potential Delilah.
In 2 seconds, I've got a tissue depth that is exactly 4.5 millimeters out from the surface, and it's exactly perpendicular to the surface.
With the markers in place, he adds the ears and begins to attach the muscles. If this is the virtual skull of Delilah, then Greg is well on his way to creating the muscles that control the most deceptive face in history. For betraying Samson, Delilah receives her 5,500 pieces of silver, a huge sum of money for the time.
With his strength gone, courtesy of Delilah's treachery, the Philistines capture Samson and gouge out his eyes. According to the Bible, Samson is put in a prison that may have been right behind me.
Blinded, then left to rot, Samson still holds in his mind the image of the beautiful and duplicitous Delilah. In Montreal, Victoria Lywood has almost completed what may have been one face of a two-faced femme fatale.
I need to do some fine-tuning on the sculpture now and get rid of all the lumps and bumps in her face.
It's taken well over a week, but she's only days away from witnessing the first reconstructed Philistine woman ever.
She's youthful. Her eyes wouldn't necessarily be that hollow. And I need to do some more work here on her eyelids.
It's time for Greg Mahoney to add Our Lady's skin to his virtual Delilah.
We do the skin in two phases using this approach. What I'll be doing is growing skin off of the skull that's going to cover the entire piece with a duplicate of the skull, but it's going to be bigger. So I'll be growing it to 4.5 millimeters, which is the thickness that we have that covers the top of our head up top here. We'll also have skin that then coincides with the hard tissue that's just below the skin. What we won't address with this first step is the deep tissue that sits in here along the cheeks. So it's going to take a moment, and it's going to look a bit like an even scarier version of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. You can see what's happening. I can really tug and pull that now. And I'm just going to tug that out until that tissue depth marker just starts to disappear. So this way I'm able to start sculpting her face with the skin that's been grown directly from her skull.
"3,000 years ago, the desert sands of Canaan covered up this Philistine woman's remains. According to the Bible, this is the time when its most famous Philistine enchantress, Delilah, disappears from the record. After selling the secret of Samson's strength, she left him to die.
So having been captured by the Philistines, he now lies languishing in jail. But he's hoping against hope that there's still a chance that he can take revenge against these Philistines. And he knows that there is a chance because he can feel his hair growing back and so his strength returning. And it's after this that he's then put on show as a trophy of the Philistines' victory over the Israelites. Philistines are singing and chanting to their god Dagon in the temple. Samson is subjected to the ultimate humiliation, being forced to dance along to the music. So this is where he asks God for the chance to take vengeance on the Philistines. And this is what happens. He embraced the two middle pillars that the temple rested upon. Samson cried, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he pulled with all his might. The temple came crashing down on the lords and on all the people in it. Those who were slain by him as he died outnumbered those who were slain by him while he lived.
This ends our story.
Or does it?
What happens to Delilah?
Well, that's a very good question, and we don't really know the answer to it.
Judges doesn't tell us, does it?
No, I mean, there are two possibilities, two main ones, I guess. One is that she was there dancing along to Dagon as well, and she was a victim of the crash. But I suppose the second option is that she got this nice bribe.
And that is a lot of money back then, and that's a lot of money now. I'm guessing she moves up to Ashdod. Who knows? She could have moved to the beach, bought a nice little condo in Gaza.
Or was she there with the worshippers and getting her comeuppance with the rest of the Philistines? Who knows?
That's kind of a happier ending, isn't it? Or a more just ending, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll just never know.
No.
But what we do know is that this woman's skull dates back to Delilah's time and place in history.
We're still retaining a lot of the details that make this person who she is. So in subtleties from the little bumps that we might see translate out to the surface here.
Greg extrudes all the clues directly from the bone.
So what's nice about this versus laying clay on top of the surface is that I'm keeping those subtleties, and as I stretch this skin out to match up with the tissue depth markers, all of those details will remain.
He begins with the nose.
So we can see from this that her nose will not project out beyond this point here, and probably have the nasal tip somewhere down around in here.
He places the eyes.
And I can float it right in that space. For her, we've got an 18, 20-year-old. We'll keep them where they are. The older we get, these eyeballs start to settle back into the socket.
He builds the eyelids.
We want that lid to sort of come just over the top of that iris. Now I've got two separate lids, a top lid and a bottom lid. And we're going to tug them out to their attachment points.
And finally, the lips and the mouth.
So we're looking at the height of these teeth that are going to help us determine the thickness of the lips. We know that the corners of the mouth are going to correspond to just behind the canines. We're going to reposition this mouth so that it corresponds.
After hours of fine-tuning, Greg has got her in good shape for a handoff to digital artist Stephen Taylor.
It has all of the sculptural detail that I need, but it's like a brick of concrete. It's too heavy. It's just got too much information. It's hard to work with. So what I need to do now is take and translate this into a nice, light, clean canvas.
Steve applies a virtual mesh to the surface, shrink-wrapping his canvas around Greg's model and making an exact mold of the facial features.
So this is going to be the super simple version of what the forensic artist supplied. It's also going to make it easy for me to control the results of hair, makeup, skin details, and the eyes that we've made.
It's Stephen's job to bring life into the eyes.
So what I'm doing now is painting a hazel eye color, which is one of the possible eye colors recommended by the anthropologist Israel Herskovitz. It can take about a day to fully paint and get all of the different artifacts, the reflection and specularity working properly.
He then adds the skin colors and textures.
A lot of times inside of the corner of the eyes, inside the shadows of the face, there's a blue hue. And so I like to sort of favor that stuff for the render by adding it into the color maps. And now it's time to bring all these different hair systems in. This is really going to bring some character to her, so I'm excited to see, because now, now she starts to really come to life. So each one of these hairs in her eyebrows, eyelashes, they all need to be placed individually to add just a little more naturalism, to break off the uniformity that tends to happen in the computer. It gets really tedious, but the results can be just spectacular.
And now, Stephen's almost caught up to Victoria. She's just finishing the final textures.
I'm using sandpaper to texture the skin.
Detailing the eyes and eyelashes.
The average eyelash is approximately 7 to 9 millimeters in length, and these are a little over 10.
And brushing the lips and cheeks.
We just want to bring this forward a little bit. Israel said that she would have prominent cheekbones and large eyes.
And with the toss of the wig, it's time to see how the two models compare.
So when I'm putting together a final look, I need a lot of reference images. Normally I go to books and libraries, museum collections, taking influences from a number of different sources. So what we're doing now is a bit of detective work. The archaeologists have given us references from Minoan civilization, and from those images we're going to start to put together her hairstyle, clothing, and jewelry.
For clues to how Delilah may have dressed, they turn to artwork from her ancestral home on the Aegean Islands.
And so we've got references from Minoan wall art, fresco painting, and her hairstyles coming right out of their local flavor. So it's really kind of magical, because now she's going to start to come to life, and she's going to be a totally new and unique creation based on this 3,000-year-old skull, which is just unbelievable.
In Montreal, Victoria Lywood adds her final touches to the physical model.
All right, I'm finished.
And for the first time, we can gaze upon a face that Samson may have found simply irresistible.
And that is the face of a 3,000-year-old Philistine lady.
So we've started to dress the model, adding jewelry and clothing. We've got a jacket and a blouse, some earrings and beads in her hair, and now we've got this beautiful necklace that we've made, and she's looking great. I'm really happy so far.
To breathe some more life into our Delilah, Stephen adds a subtle smile.
And in the case of this little Mona Lisa smile, that I've added onto her just to try and take her away from that standard forensic identification bust. Whenever I take one of these little detours here, like adding an expression to her face, I find out that there is actually an underlying science. The forensic artist has pointed out places where there's definitely bone asymmetry that would inform how her face would move. Greg and I talk greatly about protecting the work that he does, but also leveraging the best of what's known about how to move the face around. And so now it's my job to bring that information back in. Here are some of the notes. We've got things like a slight crinkle beneath the eye, so this whole cheek pad is going to move up just a little bit. Softening of this crease that I have, really hard. This little wrinkle can be pushed, a little bit of a dimple. She's a young woman, so this muscle here right next to her mouth would be really strong, and we're going to make those changes. It's an artistic process, but at the same time, it's informed by everything that the forensic artist has done. And this is something that isn't normally done in forensic art, bringing an expression in. But we have the advantage now with the digital tool set to be able to morph between expressions, to look at the bone and muscle patterns and say, if they were going to smile, the asymmetry of their face would say they would smile to this side or that side. And I think it's fascinating. It's something I've learned in the process just of working here on this woman.
The last 20 centuries have offered us a bounty of beautiful Delilahs. But this face represents the accurate blend of art and science. Alive, alluring but strong, and perhaps expertly deceitful. This is how a woman like Delilah would have looked.